From the gear, let's choose Account and Settings. There are several tabs in this section. In the first one, Company Name. So if you have made a spelling mistake or didn't capitalize when you set your company up, you can edit the name here. Perhaps you also have a different legal name and you want your company name and your legal name to be different. You can add a different legal name here. You also can put your tax ID number in. This may be convenient to add onto your sales forms or just to have in one place in case you need it for future reference. You can decide what tax form your business uses. In this case, we've chosen 1120S, a small business as an S corporation. You can indicate your industry here. You can edit your company email, phone number, and website address. And you can also edit your company address and what address you would like to show your customers, and also your legal address, should those happen to be 3 different addresses. So you would uncheck this box and add in each of those different addresses. Okay, let's look under Usage. This tab shows us how many billable users you have and how many of the chart of accounts you're using. You're limited to 250. So when we're talking about setting up the chart of accounts later, and I mentioned the Reader's Digest version, just remember you are limited to 250 accounts. And I know this may seem like a lot at this moment, but I have seen users outgrow their QuickBooks and have to go to a higher level of QuickBooks Online, which costs more money. So we want to definitely stay within the limits of 250 accounts. That is in the chart of accounts. You will understand more about that in upcoming sections. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to click out of that. Now let's look under Sales. So we can customize what our sales forms look like. That'll be covered in a later section. We can determine what our default invoice terms are, our default method of delivery, whether we charge shipping, whether we use custom fields, custom transaction numbers, discounts, deposits, tips. So if your business does need to use tips, you would need to enable that here and determine if it's just you or your whole team. I am not going to save that, so I'm going to cancel out of that. Remember earlier we talked about whether or not you track inventory, and when I set up my sample company file, I had said I did not track inventory. But if I had made a mistake and should have checked that, or if later my business does start tracking inventory, I can simply come into this preference for products and services and say to track inventory. It would currently be set not to track inventory. We can determine if we want to charge late fees to our customers. We also can change the setting for progress invoicing. Progress invoicing means I create an estimate and then I create an invoice and only want to invoice part of that estimate, say 25%. This is frequently used by construction companies. We can change the default messages that show up on our sales forms. You may want something that's more specific to your company. We can also add a CC to any invoices that we email out of QuickBooks. I would highly recommend that you BCC yourself on any invoices you send out of QuickBooks. I have found that very helpful when clients have wondered whether or not their email actually got sent. So if they also get a copy in their inbox, they know it did. We can send out automatic reminders for invoices that are past due. We can determine our online delivery system, and we can determine what we want our statements to look like. This is just a brief overview of all the different things that you can change to really customize your QuickBooks. In expenses, we can determine whether or not we want to show an items table on expense and purchase forms, whether we want to track expenses and items by customer, and whether we want to make expenses and items billable. Again, if you're a construction company or a company that needs to track costs by customers, you will want this track expenses and items by customer to be on. You can also determine if you use purchase orders, and if you don't understand what purchase orders are and how they work in QuickBooks, that will be covered in an additional section. And then for advanced, we can determine if we want to have our reports default to a cash or accrual basis. So just so you quickly understand the difference between cash and accrual. Cash means it's the actual money the business brought in and deposited into the bank, and the actual money they spent, versus accrual, which means we count the invoices as income, whether we've been paid on them or not, and we count any bills that we have added into QuickBooks as cost to our business, whether we've actually paid those bills or not. Most small businesses are on a cash basis, so we may want to change that to cash so the reports automatically default to cash. When we talk about reports, we will be talking about that a bit more. We've already determined our tax form when we were in the Company tab. We also can determine whether or not to use account numbers. For instance, instead of it simply saying checking account, it may have the number 1,000 or 10,000 in front of it. Instead of saying just simply telephone expense, it may have the number 6,000 or 60,000 in front of it. CPAs do use account numbers, as well as accountants and bookkeepers. But Intuit understands that small business owners may not think in terms of those account numbers. Therefore, you can simply have checking account and telephone expense without the numbers in front of them. But if you did want to enable the numbers, this is where you would do it, and then it would ask you each time you set up a new account, what is the account number going to be? For now, we're going to leave account numbers off. Also, you can track classes or locations. We will discuss classes and locations in future sections. You can choose whether or not to pre-fill forms with previously entered content, whether to automatically apply credit, automatically invoice any unbilled activity, and automatically apply bill payments. I find most users that I work with want all of those things to be off because it can create issues. If you pre-fill a form with previously entered content, that example would be if your telephone bill last month was $137.17 and you went to enter a transaction in this month for your telephone bill, it would want to enter the same amount. And most likely your telephone bill is different each month, even if it's only by a few pennies. Also, users don't like so much that it automatically applies credits, because then you don't have the opportunity to apply credit in the way that you would want. And sometimes QuickBooks guesses wrong. So I would suggest, for now, putting all of these to off based on my experience with my clients. You can also manage all of your projects in one place by having this on. Again, if you're a construction type company or a company that does multiple projects for one customer, you will want to track projects. You can track time. You can change your currency or use multiple currency if you sell in multiple countries with different currencies. And you can change your date format, number format, etc. So those are the things that you can change to really customize QuickBooks to work the way you want it to work. So you may initially start working in QuickBooks and then come across something that you go, oh, I don't like how QuickBooks does that. I wish I could change that setting. Well, check in your account and settings and look through these tabs. You may be able to change it to work to the way you want to work. So that completes our section on additional settings in QuickBooks.